Harry Potter came to me on a train in 1990. I was sitting just staring out of the window, and the idea just fell out of nowhere. It was the purest stroke of inspiration I've ever had in my life, and I've been writing about him ever since. My absolute ambition for the book was not that it would be made into a film, much as I love films. So what my absolute ambition was to be able to walk into a bookshop and see it on the bookshelf. Having said that, now I stand back from it, yes, I do think it would make a good film because there's a lot of action in it, and I can see that some of it would work very well visually.
Okay, just for facts.
Okay.
Actually, the thing that I suppose, and I asked it of your publisher, maybe you could answer it for us anyway. Why JK Rowling? I mean, disguises yourself.
Rowling. It's Rowling.
Rowling. Sorry.
It's all right.
That's a good start.
That's because first-time writer, eager to please my publishers, they phoned me up and said, "Can we use your initials instead?" This is about 2 weeks before publication, and I said, "Yes, you can use them. I don't mind, but why?" And it was because trying to hide my gender, definitely. They thought it was a book that would appeal to boys, and they thought possibly if they saw Joanne on the front cover, they wouldn't pick it up.
So have some of your readers been surprised?
Yeah, right after the book was published, I started getting letters, "Dear Sir," but then the whole thing was blown completely out of the water because I went on Blue Peter and plainly wasn't a Sir, so what was the point, really?
Was there much response from the Blue Peter appearance?
I think so. Yeah, I'd say sales went up a bit at that point. They went up a lot more after I won the Smarties. That was the one that really boosted sales. But
in terms of readers writing to you?
No, they just tended to get my sex right and tell me they liked my orange hair. It's nice of them.
Okay, I mean, you've probably told the story more than once already.
Okay.
I'm trying to make it fresh is probably going to be difficult, but we're here in Nicholson's cab.
Mm-hmm.
What role did Nicholson's cab have in it?
Huge, because they used to let me sit here for 2 hours at a time when my daughter was asleep next to me in the pushchair. The only way I could get her up to have her nap was to keep her moving. So I used to walk around town, normally this part of town because I wanted to come here, until she fell asleep. Then I'd run in here and sit here with one cold coffee for 2 hours at a time and just write like fury. So a lot of the book, in fact the whole of chapter 10 was written in here, of the first book. But I don't tend to write in here so much anymore because I feel a bit too self-conscious about it. I feel like as though because I've given interviews in here, it's as though I'm advertising that this is where I write, so I don't tend to work in here so much anymore.
What do you remember specifically about being in here? I mean, and what were your circumstances exactly then you felt compelled to write? And write a children's book?
I've always written, although this was the first thing I tried to get published. My circumstances then were that I was a single parent, recently divorced, not working, very, very broke, and determined to finish the book because I was about to start training as a teacher, and I knew that I would have no time at all to write, so it was a self-imposed deadline. I just wanted to finish this book and just try and get it published.
Okay, so had Harry Potter existed in your head for some time before?
Harry Potter came to me on a train in 1990. I was sitting just staring out of the window, and the idea just fell out of nowhere. It was the purest stroke of inspiration I've ever had in my life, and I've been writing about him ever since. Literally, I have boxes, loads of stuff on him that has travelled with me to Portugal, where I was working before Edinburgh, back to Edinburgh, slowly growing and growing. But it was in Edinburgh that I actually kind of carved a book out of that massive material.
Okay, but that single idea was what exactly?
The single idea was Harry, this boy who didn't know he was a wizard, who for 11 years had made very odd stuff happen, that there was plainly mystery about him, but he didn't know what it was, and that then he got the letter that told him he had a place at wizard school. And I just thought it would be a lot of fun to write. I had never thought of myself as a children's writer. Everything I'd written up to then had been geared towards adults, though I'd never tried to get any of it published. So it chose me rather than me choosing it. I never sat down and thought, all right, let's try and write for children now. It was just plainly a story that was going to appeal to children.
And the name, just something simple and ordinary?
Harry is one of my favourite boys' names. Potter was actually the name of a family I used to play with when I was very small. I doubt that they'd remember me, but I just liked their surname. So that's where that came from. People have asked me if it was Dennis Potter, because I come from the Forest of Dean, but it wasn't.
Okay. In terms of writing the story, I mean, it struck me in two kind of ways, in the sense that, you could argue there's a traditional sense of school days.
Yeah. Well, I don't think of it as primarily as a school story, though obviously the school is central to the plot. I just think of it as the kind of place that most children, I would love to go. It's scary and it's exciting, and you are relieved of responsibilities to your parents or authority from your parents. I didn't go to a boarding school, I went to a comprehensive, and the idea of getting into this place that is so exciting and living there among your peers, it's just enthralling, I think. So, you know, the fact that it's a boarding school is important in plot terms because Harry has to be removed from this appalling family that he's been brought up with, this very suburban, abusive family, and he is removed to this place that is much scarier but much more fun.
Okay, did you feel like you could do anything there you liked?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I hope the books are supposed to be funny as well, and a lot of the humour for me comes from this conflict between this magical, very subversive world and the workaday world, where people simply refuse to see what's right under their noses, which is that there are still wizards living everywhere, but in secret. Well, it amused me. Sorry. Okay, get a grip, right. I thought it was funny.
How did you dream up Quidditch?
Oh, Quidditch. Well, working along the same sort of twisted logic that if they were living in secret all over the world, they are not going to support football or golf, the most boring game in existence. They're clearly going to have their own sport. And so I made up a sport that I just thought would be amusing. 4 balls, 7 aside on broomsticks, very dangerous and very violent, and I would be rubbish at it if it existed. I'm very uncoordinated, but I just thought the idea appealed to me. Most of the kids that I meet, they love the idea of Quidditch. In fact, they really love it. I think because of the violent aspect.
Well, there is a hugely cruel element to children.
Yeah, absolutely, and to most adults, but we pretend it's not there.
Did the books? I mean, so it's an impossible question, I suppose. But do you just write it, or is it planned in your head? Do you structure it, or what?
Sometimes it's sort of a day of pure indulgence. I sit down and just let myself write, but normally that means you're going to hit about 1.5 good ideas, and the rest will be rubbish. It's normally very, very, very finely planned. What I'm going to do that day, even I make meticulous plans in advance, and I bore children rotten when I meet them by saying, yes, your teachers are right. Plan it. You will never write anything as good if you just sit down and just ramble. So, sorry to be so depressing on that one.
Yeah, that's all right. There always has to be an evil force.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you're kicking in the fact that you read classics.
Yes.
Everybody nasty has a sort of, I mean, almost in terms of name, this sort of Malfoy.
Yeah.
The name of the main villain, Voldemort. The names all have this sort of classical linguistic ring to them.
Well, yeah, I just collect unusual names. Some of them definitely come from that, from the fact that I studied classics, and some of them, like the names you've just mentioned, they're twists on French. They're invented French names that mean something vaguely nasty. You have to be very careful about giving me your name if you have an unusual name, because almost for sure you will find yourself 2 books down the line popping up at Hogwarts. Yeah.
Give us some of the names you've used in the book rather than me mentioning.
Some of them, Dumbledore is Old English for Bumblebee, because he's the headmaster of the school, and that's because he likes music, and I imagine him sort of humming to himself a lot. That's where that came from. Also, I just like the name Dumbledore. It's got a nice ring to it. Some of the names that have a reason for some of them were street names and things, odd things. A couple came from books of saints, names like Bathilda and Hedwig, just excellent witchy names. That's quite blasphemous now I think of it, but never mind. And there are a few names, but I have to be very careful of people I've met and used. I have to be careful, I don't want to be sued. Can't tell you, can't.
You love alliteration, clearly.
Yeah, well I have this a lot of incidental characters have, alliteration is important, just it's easier for children to remember, I think, you know.
Daedalus Diggle.
Yeah, Daedalus Diggle, I like that. I like that one.
Piers Polkiss.
Yeah, Piers Polkiss. It's a bit unfortunate really, because I tend to choose, someone said to me recently, I wanted to call my son Neville and I can't now because I give the name Neville to someone who's a bit hopeless in the book, although I like him very much. But what can you do? You can't please everyone.
Is there any of yourself? I mean, I think I've read one of the other interviews you gave that a part of you is in one of the characters.
Yeah, definitely. The main female character, Hermione, she's a caricature of what I was at 11. A right little know-it-all, you know, but underneath very insecure. That's very much what I was like. But I wasn't as clever as her. If I'd have been as clever as her, I would have been, you know, genius. She's a lot cleverer than I was. But I was definitely that kind of little girl who constantly thinks they've got everything wrong and then ends up with 110% and everyone wants to kill them or kick them.
I was curious in reading it, I mean, at least I do as a reader see it. It's all written very visually.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so. I think I see things before I write them. I don't. I visualise things quite clearly, and then it's trying to express what I'm seeing. I don't know that every writer writes like that. Now I've met other writers. Sometimes I think the words come first, but with me the vision of it comes first, and then I'm trying to capture that as accurately as I can. So that's flattering that you would say that, you know, you see it very clearly, because I'm trying to show you what I'm seeing. If you see what I mean.
But it's almost written for the cinema in a sense. I mean, I'm particularly cinema orientated person. All I ever wanted to be was a novelist. My absolute ambition for the book was not that it would be made into a film, much as I love films. So what my absolute ambition was to be able to walk into a bookshop and see it on the bookshelf. Having said that, now I stand back from it, yes, I do think it would make a good film because there's a lot of action in it. And I can see that some of it would work very well visually. So yes, I agree with you. But that wasn't in my mind. I wasn't writing it thinking, which camera angle will this chapter take, you know? Not at all. How difficult was it to get it published?
It seemed difficult at the time, but I think now that I probably had a very easy time of it. It was turned down by 3 publishers before Bloomsbury, which actually isn't that many at all. But one of them kept me hanging around for about a year, saying we might, we don't know, and that was bad for my nerves, and it made it feel far more difficult than it probably was. I was very lucky. I got the second agent I approached took me on, so that was the big break. That was the biggest break, that I was taken on by a very good agent, Christopher Little, and it was then up to him to take it round to publishers, which again saves your nerves. I wasn't the one who had it thumping back onto my doormat every morning.
Given you said you weren't going to teachers training.
Yeah, and I did go.
Yeah, go on.
I did go and train as a teacher, and all the year that I was doing my postgraduate certificate of education, I was waiting to hear from publishers. I already had my agent. Just before I started teacher training, I got my agent. So all that year, I was on tenterhooks, whether it would happen or not. And at that point, my realistic ambition was teach part-time, write part-time, which would have been a great life. I like teaching. My ultimate dream, obviously, was to be able to write full-time, but I knew how few children's writers managed to make a living wage out of it, so I wasn't under any illusions.
So had you started the second Harry Potter book?
Yeah, but it was going pretty slowly, because by this time, you know, I'm studying full-time, I'm obviously still looking after my daughter, and writing time was pretty thin on the ground at that point.
So when did things exactly turn round? Everything
turned round. 2 things happened. First of all, I got a grant from the Scottish Arts Council, which I think was the highest grant they'd ever give. It was £8,000, which to me at that time was a fortune. And that was purely so that I could afford to take only part-time teaching work, and I could afford to finish book 2. And then shortly after I got that grant, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was sold to America for an amount that was way outside my wildest dreams, and then that was it. I could afford to give up teaching completely. So, which was a very scary feeling and completely paralysed me, because when I got the phone call, and first of all I got the phone call saying there's an auction going on in New York, you know, and my immediate reaction was to laugh hysterically, because I couldn't. This was so beyond my ken. And then an hour later I got a phone call saying, telling me that Scholastic had won the auction, and for a 6-figure amount. And instead of feeling, as you would have expected, wildly happy, I felt utter terror, because I'd nearly finished book 2 at this point, and suddenly I couldn't write. I just thought, you know, the stakes had been upped so much. I thought book 2 was now going to be a horrible letdown to everyone, and every word had to be worth a certain amount of dollars, and I found it very scary.
Well, because the expectation has just grown.
Yeah, absolutely. From being absolutely, totally obscure, where I was really quite happy, and just writing purely for me, suddenly I felt as though about 100 people were looking over my shoulder every time I set pen to paper, and it was a very weird experience. I'm not being ungrateful. I am now. I couldn't be happier now. But that's because I've now finished book 2 and I'm happy with it. But for a month or so, I just felt terrified.
Did you know when you were writing book 2 that Harry Potter would continue?
Yeah, I'd always, almost from the start, I'd envisaged it as a 7-book series, which would see him through wizard school and then he'd be a fully qualified wizard at the end of it. That's the sort of big story, how you qualify as a wizard, you see. And there is another bigger plot that's going on that I can't really talk about because it will ruin it for people who will read all the books. But so yeah, all of them were plotted in quite a lot of detail already, which obviously made it easier in a way. It wasn't as though I had to go back and sit down and think, right, what's the next book about? I already knew. So the
7-book cycle as a story is written in your head?
Oh yeah, and bits of all of the books bar 5. 5 is still the sketchiest of the lot. So if people are waiting longer for 5 than any of the others, that's why. You heard it here first. But yeah, bits of all of the other books, except 5, are written already. And the final chapter of book 7 is written for my own satisfaction. So it constantly reminds me what I'm aiming for.
So the end is written?
Yeah, the very, very end of it is written. Mm.
But okay, that's Do you need another coffee?
No, I'm fine. I've still got enough.
Okay.
Continuity.
Learning the trade. So I'll just ask that again.
Okay.
So the end of book 7 is written already?
Yeah, it's written, the whole chapter, which is just because it's for my own satisfaction. It reminds me where I'm going. But so many children now have expressed so much interest in it that I kind of feel like it should be under lock and key. You know, it feels quite valuable. It's already written. So, and that chapter deals with what happens to the survivors after they finish school. Because when Harry leaves school, that's it. I'm not writing about him anymore, and that's going to be horrendous. That's going to feel like a bereavement, because by the time I write book 7, I will have been writing about him for 12 or 13 years. But I have to let go at some point, and that will be it.
But you have a commitment to Harry Potter for at least 5 years.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Which I'm perfectly happy about, because I love writing those books. I really love it, and yes, that's all I have to say on that bit. Sorry. And
the change in terms of folk like me coming to see you, when did that change? When I met you down in London, let's do it chronologically. The Smarties Prize.
Yeah, that happened after the Smarties. I won the Smarties Prize about a month after I had sold the American rights. That was the big change in my life, generally in my day-to-day life, because after that journalists specifically, became interested in me, and before that they had no reason at all to be interested in me. So that was a steep learning curve, I think they call it. That was a bit scary for a while.
And actually getting the Smarties?
The Smarties was amazing. You probably know that's voted for entirely by children, and winning that was just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. It really was. Partly because I felt that a lot of the publicity had focused on the fact that I was a single mother and that I had written in cafes, and that's perfectly true, and it's interesting. I can see why that's a good story. But winning the Smarties meant that, oh, and by the way, the book might be all right as well. So that meant quite a lot to me.
Just give me some examples of what kids have said to you. The first time a kid came up to you and said, "You wrote Harry Potter, did you?"
Yeah. First of all, they always ask me, "Where do you get your ideas from?" And the honest answer is obviously that I don't know. They just come, but that's so boring. So I try and think of ideas I've had that I can see a sort of reason. And then they ask me about Quidditch a lot, why I called it that, and where I got the rules from. And they're interested in the words, the made-up words. They want to know why I call non-magic people muggles very often, because they like the word, they think it's funny. And that comes from mugs, obviously.
Do you remember anything an individual child ever said to you?
Oh, there have been loads of different things.
My favourite one was actually not something someone said. It was a girl who wrote to me after I'd been to visit her school, and she wrote me a letter saying, "You were very nice to us, and you were very, very interesting, but you really should brush your hair." I liked that one quite a lot. And I get letters from little girls who send me their photos and say, can they play Hermione in the film? And I have to write back and say there is no film, and if there is a film I won't be casting it, sorry. But thank you for your photo, which was lovely. Boys, sometimes I get the feeling that boys have been prodded into writing because their mothers are so amazed they've read a book. Go on, write to her. Boys tend to write about how many times they've read the book. They're so proud of themselves that they've kept reading it. And often I feel vindicated in that it's a long book. The main problem publishers prior to Bloomsbury had with the book was that it was too long for a 9-year-old. But I get a surprising amount of letters from kids saying, I'm glad it's that long, because most books that I like finish too soon, which is heartening. You know, we hear so much about kids aren't reading, and plainly they still are.
But in writing, did you think I'm writing for 9 to 12-year-olds?
No. In fact, until Bloomsbury told me I was writing for 9-year-olds, I didn't know who I was writing for. That's the truth. Except for occasionally avoiding a polysyllable where a perfectly good monosyllable would do, I never stopped to think about it. I write what I enjoy reading, truthfully. And I was quite interested to see what a publisher would think, you know, was the appropriate age band, because I didn't really know.
But do you feel you're writing for everybody, or do you feel you're writing for everybody?
Well, I do feel I'm writing for everybody, because I'm sure that if someone else had written the books, I would enjoy writing them, and I'm 33 next week, so I hope I'm writing for everyone. I've had a surprising number of letters from adults who unashamedly, they don't say, oh, I bought it for my daughter, they just say, oh, you know, I picked it up and I really enjoyed it. And the best one was a 60-year-old woman who wants to join the Harry Potter fan club. I like that one a lot.
What she wrote and said, I want to join it?
Yeah, with no excuse, like this is for my grandchildren, just I want to join it. That was brilliant.
Okay. Do you feel protective about the book? I mean, if they aren't, as seems likely, by the time this goes out, the film rights probably will have gone, and the expectation is they'll go to the States. Do you feel protective of the book? Yeah,
I think you do. And the only control you have, really, as a writer, as an author, is that there has been quite a lot of interest. There have been different television and film companies have expressed an interest. The only control you have is to sign the contract with someone you truly believe will make, you know, the right film. But after that, you know, it is out of your control. So yes, I feel anxious about it, and I feel nervous about it, and I will only sign the contract when I really believe that's the case. But it is a leap of faith, always, obviously. And then there's, I mean, sorry, it's a devil's advocate question, but you know, if it goes to America, if it goes to something like DreamWorks or Disney, the chances are Harry Potter won't be English anymore. Can't really say anything there, but it's not going to be DreamWorks. Or Disney, as a matter of fact. Can we not put that on there? Because I'm not really supposed to say that, and my agent would like shoot me. He would shoot me. But yeah, I'd rather keep it. Obviously, I want Harry to be British. I will fight as hard as I can for him to be British. If he's not British, it won't be for want of trying on my. I suppose that at the last resort, I will have to picket the cinema, and what can I do?
How far have you got? I mean, have you just finished yet another book?
Yeah, I've just finished book 3. So which was the most complicated plot yet, so I'm still a bit, you know, my head's still crammed with it. It's quite difficult to promote book 2 when your head is full of book 3, and this will continue until book 7, obviously, when I'll probably feel, as well as feeling really sad, this sense of liberation that finally I can talk about anything without giving things away.
What's book 3 called?
Book 3 is called Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which will mean nothing to you unless you've read book 2. Once you've read book 2, I'm not trying to sell more books, I'm just telling you, I'm just telling it like it is. Meaningless unless you've read 2.
The plot is that much more complicated?
Yeah, I think it's probably, in a way I hope it's the most complicated plot of the lot, but sometimes you can't tell until you get halfway through. I really enjoyed writing it for that reason, but any more complicated and my head will explode, so I think that was probably the most complicated of all of them.
How hard work is it? I mean, it's arguably not hard work at all.
Well, in some ways, it's not hard work at all, because it's the thing I love most of all, and it's a dream to wake up in the morning and think, what am I doing today? I'm writing, and I'm getting paid for it. You know, this is the dream of my life. But I make it hard work for myself. I rewrite endlessly. Sometimes, you know, I spend, I don't know about everyone, but I spend an entire day staring at a piece of paper and you come away with 3 lines of writing. Other days, you know, I can write 2,000 words, 3,000 words and be happy with most of it. Probably the most difficult part of it is you never can tell when inspiration is going to strike. So.
Did you write on a computer or what?
No, I still write longhand. It's partly superstitious, I think. It worked for me twice, writing everything out in longhand and then typing it up, so I don't want to break the winning formula.
When you wrote that first book, preparing to go to teacher's training book, did you have any idea, I mean, what was your highest expectation?
My highest expectation, well, not expectations, my most far-fetched dream was a kind review in a decent newspaper, and the idea that I would be able to maybe teach part-time and write part-time. And I thought that, but to me it seemed like this huge hurdle even getting published, which indeed it is. It's not that easy. So I didn't really look much past that. So everything that's happened since has been well beyond my wildest expectations. It really has. I still sometimes can't quite believe it's happened.
But you worry that Harry Potter has taken over everything? It will become too much?
If it becomes too much for me, that will probably be my fault. I mean, at the end of the day, it's up to me who I speak to and what I do with Harry. And I don't think I will become sick of him. Other people might, but I can't, there's nothing I can do about that.
Yeah, I'm just curious because it doesn't, I mean, there seems like a chance here this becomes a kind of a character that may well last in a way that...
I hope so.
You know, that William has, or Tintin has, or whoever.
That would be my highest ambition. My highest ambition would be that long after everyone's forgotten that I was a single mother and that I was poor and that I wrote in cafes, people are still reading about Harry Potter. That's my highest ambition. I'm unashamed in wanting as many people as possible to read the books. I always wanted Harry to be wildly famous, because that to me was a mark that loads of people had enjoyed the book. I never expected, and this is the simple truth, I never expected me to be in any way famous. So that was a bit startling. I kind of wanted to be famous in the sense that you might one day hand over your credit card and someone say, "My God, didn't you write Harry Potter?" But not in the sense that your picture would be in the papers. So that was a bit disorientating.
In the way that people remember William rather than Richmond Compton.
Yeah. And that's fine by me. That, you know, I want Harry Potter's name to live.
Will your name on the books remain the same, or will you put your full Christian?
Yeah, it's a bit late, I think, to change JK now. I don't mind JK. I quite like it. But when, I think if the publishers had known, obviously, if they'd had a crystal ball, they wouldn't have bothered, because it became apparent so very quickly that I was a woman that really it was a bit of a pointless exercise. Since
I filmed you at the Carnegie, you know, collecting whatever you got there, how do you recommend
I got commended. I got commended. Yeah. I'd like it to say highly, but it didn't. But I was very happy with commended. So.
Well, that's what I see. I mean, what alerted me to you was given that Carnegie is chosen by the librarians, and when we talked to the kids about the books that won, they said, "Well, we don't like reading these books about death. Harry Potter, why did you say that?" It's quite funny.
I have to be careful what I say there, don't I?
Yeah. Anything memorable about the Carnegie you did? Have any of these?
To be shortlisted for the Carnegie has a particular prestige. It was it's the one I think most people have heard of, and to be shortlisted was wonderful. Partly because one of my favourite books as a child, if not my favourite book as a child, which was The Little White Horse by Elizabeth Goudge, which is largely forgotten now, I think. I've had difficulty finding it in bookshops, won the Carnegie in 1946. So to be shortlisted for it was very meaningful to me. Can't say much more there.
Okay, that's fine. We're almost done. You sort of answered this, but I'll ask it again. Why do you think, well maybe you can't answer it anyway, but why do you think kids and others like the books, like the character?
I think that Harry is, I think in one way he's a hero in the best sense, in that he has admirable qualities, more admirable qualities than I do. He's a nobler person than I am. At the same time, he is a human person, and when he's bullied or goes through any of the difficulties any school child goes through, he has normal human feelings of wanting to hit back and wanting to win and wanting to beat his adversaries. And I think he's quite a human person, even though he's a hero. And I think certainly his two best friends are recognisable in many people I've met. Some of the unpleasant characters too are very recognisable. I think I've met them several times over in my life. So possibly for that reason, but it's very hard for me to say because I wrote something I enjoyed. That's why I wrote it. I never once, when I was writing Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, stopped to think about, will this appeal to that marketing group? I wrote it purely, the sole criteria was what I found scary, what I found funny, and characters that I liked. So in a way, you're asking the wrong person.
But you knew you were writing for children.
Well, plainly, it was a story that I thought children would like. It took me 6 months or so to get into. At first, I tried too hard to write for children because I'd never tried to write anything for children before, and what came out of my pen was sickening. I kept reading it and thinking, right, that's patronising. That makes me want to vomit. That's just too sickly for words. And after 6 months, I gave up and I thought, okay, you're just going to write it for you. And every now and then I'd go back and, as I say, just delete the polysyllable and put in a nice service call. Monosyllable, and that was it.
What was it like going on Blue Peter?
Lifetime's ambition fulfilled, that was. I was very nervous about television. In fact, I said no to, I was offered a few interviews on television prior to that, and I didn't want to go on because I find it nerve-wracking. But then Blue Peter, the perennial appeal of the Blue Peter badge, at last I got it. Yes. I was so proud of myself to have a Blue Peter badge. Embarrassingly proud, in fact. I would have gone through far more to get Blue Peter badge.
You still have it? I
still have it. I'm going to frame it. My daughter's not allowed to touch it. Is that it?
That's it.
Brilliant.
You did well.